Ethan was halfway to work when his heart suddenly dropped. He had forgotten an important file. He sighed, turned the steering wheel, and began driving back home, unaware that this quick stop would uncover something he was never meant to see. The morning sun was barely up when he pulled into the driveway. Everything looked normal, too normal. The quietness in the house felt heavier than usual. His father's illness had turned the home into a place of silence and routine, and Grace, their house help, was the only one who kept things running smoothly. Ethan walked in briskly, heading toward his room, but then he froze. A sound, soft, breathy, came from his father's room. Not the sound of pain or coughing, but something different, strange, unfamiliar, wrong. His pulse quickened. He took a step closer, every creak of the floorboards echoing in the stillness. "Dad?" he called out quietly, but there was no reply. Just another faint, muffled sound. He reached the door, and before he could touch the handle, it swung open. Grace stepped out, startled. She was wrapped in a towel, drops of water still glistening on her shoulder, her face pale, and her mouth streaked with what looked like milk. "Grace!" Ethan's voice cracked in disbelief. "What are you doing here, like this?" She froze, her eyes darting between him and the floor. I'm sorry, sir," she stammered. "I was taking my bath when I heard your father cry. I didn't want to ignore him, so I quickly tied my towel and came to check." Her voice trembled slightly. Her explanation sounded innocent, maybe too innocent. Ethan stared at her, his throat tight, trying to read her eyes. Something in her tone didn't sit right, but he said nothing. He simply brushed past her and entered his father's room. His father lay still on the bed, breathing heavily but calm now. Ethan gently rubbed his hand. "Dad, you okay?" he whispered. His father nodded weakly. Ethan stayed a few seconds longer before leaving. Back in his car, he tried to shake it off, but his mind refused to be quiet. The strange sound, Grace in a towel, the white liquid on her mouth. He gripped the steering wheel tighter. No, that's impossible," he muttered to himself. "Grace has been with us for years. She's practically family. She couldn't. Yet the image kept replaying in his mind. Grace stepping out, startled, her mouth slightly open, that milky trace he couldn't explain. "Milk," he whispered. "Why milk?" He tried to convince himself it was nothing, maybe just coincidence. But deep down, a cold, unsettling thought began to form, one he didn't dare finish. And as he drove back to work, that thought refused to leave him. That night, the house was quiet again. Too quiet. Ethan lay on his bed beside his fiancée, Laura. The room was dim, the soft glow from the bedside lamp falling across his face. He stared at the ceiling, his mind replaying everything that had happened earlier. Grace stepping out of his father's room, the towel, the strange milky trace on her lips, the nervous tone in her voice. He turned on his side, trying to sleep, but his thoughts refused to rest. Laura noticed. She rolled over to face him, brushing his arm gently. "Ethan," she whispered, "you've been quiet since you came home. What's wrong?" Ethan didn't answer right away. He just lay there, breathing slowly, his eyes distant. He wanted to believe what he saw was innocent, but the picture in his head was too strong to ignore. He finally turned toward her, his voice low. "Babe," he said softly, "I'm confused. Really confused about what I saw today." Laura frowned. "What happened?" Ethan hesitated. He had never told anyone about what he saw until now. "When I went back home to get the file I forgot, I heard a strange sound coming from my father's room. It didn't sound like he was in pain. It sounded different." He swallowed hard. "So, I went closer to check. And just as I got to the door, it opened, and Grace came out. She was wearing only a towel, and there was something white, like milk, on her mouth." Laura's eyes widened. "What?" Her voice rose in shock. "Did you ask her what she was doing there?" "Yes," Ethan replied, still sounding uncertain. "She said she was taking her bath when she heard my dad cry, so she tied her towel and rushed to check on him." Laura sat up sharply. "And the milk? Did you ask about that?" Ethan shook his head slowly. "No, that part I didn't. I didn't even know what to say." Laura threw her hands in the air. "I told you," she snapped. "I told you that girl can't be trusted. I've said it so many times. Sack her, but you never listen." Ethan looked away, his jaw tightening. "Laura, don't jump to conclusions." "Jump to what?" she cut in angrily. "Ethan, open your eyes. A house help wrapped in a towel coming from your father's room, with milk on her mouth? Do you even hear how that sounds? He said nothing. The anger in her voice only made the weight in his chest heavier. Laura got out of bed, her bare feet hitting the floor with purpose. I'm going to her room, she said, her tone sharp. I'll ask her what she was really doing there. Ethan sat up quickly. Laura, wait. She was already halfway to the door. Wait, babe, he said again, this time louder. Don't go. I have a plan. Laura stopped, her hand on the doorknob, breathing hard. What plan? Ethan stood and walked closer, lowering his voice as if the walls could hear them. If she's doing anything wrong, confronting her won't help. She'll deny everything. The best way to find out the truth is to see it ourselves. Laura looked at him, confused. See it? How? Ethan's eyes darkened slightly. We'll put a secret camera in my father's room. Somewhere no one will notice. Then we'll watch what happens when no one's around. For a moment, Laura said nothing. Then a slow, knowing smile spread across her face. That's a good idea, she said. A very good idea. Because I've always known that girl is up to something. I can feel it. Ethan nodded, though his heart felt heavy. As Laura returned to bed, still muttering under her breath, Ethan sat on the edge of the mattress, lost in thought. He didn't want to believe Grace was capable of anything unclean. She had cared for his father for years. She was quiet, humble, respectful. But now, every little thing she did, every smile, every step, felt suspicious. He stared into the dark hallway outside their room, the silence pressing against his ears. In that silence, he made up his mind. Tomorrow, before anyone woke up, he would install the camera. And by nightfall, he would finally know the truth. The next day came quietly. The air in the house felt heavy, as if even the walls knew something was about to happen. When Ethan came back from work that evening, he was holding a small box in his hand. His eyes looked tired but determined. I got the camera, babe, he said as he stepped into the living room. Laura, who had been waiting all day, smiled sharply. That's good, she said, standing up from the couch. Let's get this over with. Together, they went upstairs. The house was dim. The only sound was the steady ticking of the old clock in the hallway. Ethan opened the small box carefully. Inside was a tiny CCTV camera, no bigger than his palm. Laura watched closely as he examined it. Are you sure it'll work? Ethan nodded. It will. Once it's on, it records everything. They both tiptoed into Mr. George's room. The old man was sleeping peacefully, his breathing soft and slow. Grace had already cleaned the room earlier and left, so they were alone. Ethan found a perfect spot, high up near the bookshelf, hidden behind a picture frame. She'll never notice, he whispered. Laura crossed her arms, watching him fix it in place. Good. Now let's see what our little angel has been up to. When they were done, they both left the room quietly, shutting the door gently behind them. The next morning, Ethan left early for work, giving Laura a kiss on the forehead before leaving. Don't forget to check the camera feed, he whispered before walking out the door. Laura waited for the right moment. She stayed upstairs, pretending to read, but her eyes kept darting toward the hallway. Minutes later, she saw Grace moving through the house from her window upstairs, calm, quiet, like she always did. Grace entered the kitchen and began preparing breakfast. The smell of fried eggs and oatmeal filled the house. When she was done, she placed everything neatly on a tray, added a glass of milk, and carried it toward Mr. George's room. Laura's heartbeat quickened. Now we'll see, she murmured under her breath. She rushed into Ethan's room, turned on his laptop, and connected the feed from the hidden camera. The screen flickered for a second, then came alive. She saw Grace open the door gently and walk in. The tray of food was balanced carefully in her hands. She placed it on the small table beside the bed and sat down near Mr. George, who was awake now, staring weakly at her. Then, to Laura's shock, Grace began to unbutton the old man's shirt. Laura's eyes widened. Her hand flew to her mouth. Oh my God, she gasped. Her chest started to rise and fall fast. I knew it, she whispered. I knew she was dirty. She reached for her phone, ready to call Ethan, her fingers shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. But then something unexpected happened. Grace didn't do what Laura thought she would. Instead, she took out a soft towel and dipped it into a bowl of warm water beside the bed. Gently, she began wiping Mr. George's chest and arms, humming a slow, sweet song. Her voice was soft, like a mother singing to a baby. Mr. George gave a faint smile. His weak eyes followed her as she sang. though he couldn't speak or move his body. Laura froze. Her mouth hung open. "What is she doing?" she whispered. Grace continued cleaning him with care, slow, gentle strokes, never rushing, never complaining. When she finished, she buttoned his shirt again, fixed his pillow, and brought the tray of food closer. Feeding him wasn't easy. His hands trembled. He could barely open his mouth. But Grace was patient. Each time she gave him a spoon of food, she sang a little louder, swaying her body from side to side as if dancing for him. "Come on, Papa, just one more," she said softly. When he finally swallowed, she smiled like she had won a small victory. Then came the last spoon. Grace lifted it carefully, but as she brought it to his lips, he coughed suddenly. The food sprayed out, splashing across her face and clothes. Laura gasped, covering her mouth again. But Grace didn't shout. She didn't frown. She didn't even wipe her face right away. Instead, she rubbed his chest gently, helping him breathe. "It's okay, Papa," she said in a quiet, comforting voice. "You're fine. Don't worry." She cleaned his mouth and the sheets with a towel, then wiped her own face. She even smiled as she cleaned, still humming softly like nothing had happened. When she finished feeding him, she stood up, picked up the tray, and walked out of the room, calm, gentle, and quiet as always. The house felt different. The quiet wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the kind of silence that made your chest tight. Laura sat alone in the room, staring at the laptop screen. The video had shown nothing but kindness. Grace had cared for Mr. George like a daughter. Laura's face darkened as she replayed it in her mind. No, this can't be. If Ethan sees this, he'll trust her again, she thought. I can't let that happen. Her fingers trembled as she touched the laptop. He already doubts her, she whispered to herself. I just have to make sure he never changes his mind. While she was still thinking of what to do, she heard movement downstairs. The old door creaked open. She glanced at the screen again. The camera was still on. Grace had just walked into Mr. George's room, holding a tray of medicine and water. Laura's eyes narrowed. Perfect, she muttered and stood up quickly. Her slippers slapped hard against the floor as she stormed down the hallway. She burst through the door so fast that Grace almost dropped the medicine. What are you doing to him, Grace? Laura shouted. Her voice was so loud it startled Mr. George, who blinked weakly in confusion. Grace jumped up. Ma'am, please, I'm just giving him his medicine. Liar, Laura screamed, pointing at her. I knew it. I knew you were doing something to him. Grace's hands shook. Please, I didn't do anything wrong, she said, her voice trembling. He was sweating, so I cleaned him and tried to feed him. Feed him? Laura cut in, laughing bitterly. Is that what you call it now? Before Grace could say another word, Laura picked up her phone and dialed Ethan. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was sharp and dramatic. Babe, come home now, she cried. I just caught Grace red-handed. You won't believe what she's doing to your father. What? Ethan's voice exploded through the phone. Just come home now, Laura shouted, pretending to sob. Hurry. Ethan's heart pounded as he raced into his car. His mind was spinning. He pressed his foot hard on the pedal, the tires screeching as he sped home. When he arrived, Laura was already waiting at the door, pretending to cry. I told you, Ethan. I told you that girl isn't who she seems. Ethan's voice was shaky. What happened? What did she do? Laura sniffled, putting a hand on her chest. I saw her on top of your sick father, taking advantage of him. Ethan froze. His face went pale. What? His voice came out in a whisper at first, then turned into a shout. How dare you, Grace? Grace stepped forward, eyes wide and full of tears. Sir, please, that's not true. I would never do such a thing. Please believe me, sir. I swear I didn't. Ethan's chest rose and fell fast. Grace, I trusted you. We treated you like family. Laura folded her arms, pretending to look hurt. You see? You see what she really is. Without wasting time, Laura called the police. Please come quickly, she said. We just caught our Househelp doing something terrible to my fiancé's father. Within minutes, 2 police cars pulled up outside. The flashing red and blue lights painted the walls like a warning. Grace was still crying, begging them to listen. Please, I'm innocent. I didn't do anything wrong. But no one cared. The police grabbed her by the arms and started leading her outside. Before they could put her in the car, Grace suddenly pulled free and ran back into the house. The officers chased after her, shouting. She rushed into Mr. George's room, knelt beside his bed, and grabbed his hand tightly. Her face was wet with tears. Sir, please, she cried. Tell them I didn't do it. Please say something. You know I didn't. The old man's fingers twitched. His lips moved slowly, as if trying to speak. His eyes filled with tears, one rolling down his wrinkled cheek and dropping onto the pillow. Everyone in the room froze for a second. Even the police paused. But the silence dragged on. He couldn't speak. One of the officers sighed. Enough of this, he said. He grabbed Grace by the arm and started pulling her away again. Please, she cried. Sir, please help me. You know I'm innocent. Her voice echoed through the house, but Mr. George could only cry silently. The police dragged her out like a criminal. Ethan stood there, speechless. His heart was racing, but something about it didn't feel right. He ran upstairs to the laptop, turned it on, and opened the CCTV program. Where's the video, he muttered. Where's the footage? He searched the files again and again. Nothing. I can't find it, he said to Laura, confused. Laura frowned, pretending to be surprised. Are you sure it recorded? They checked the power outlet. The plug was out. It wasn't plugged in. Ethan said quietly, running his fingers through his hair. Laura sighed. That's strange. I wish it was on. You would have seen everything yourself. That girl is heartless, Ethan. We'll make sure she never hurts anyone again. She turned away, hiding the small smile that crept onto her lips. She had deleted the footage and unplugged the camera, so it will appear as if the camera didn't record anything. Meanwhile, at the police station, Grace sat on the cold floor, her wrists red from the handcuffs. Her sobs filled the air. How can I prove I'm innocent? She whispered to herself. How can I fight them when they're rich and powerful? Days turned into weeks. Then came the trial. Laura stood confidently in the witness box, pretending to cry as she spoke. I saw her with my own eyes, she said, wiping fake tears. She was on top of him. Ethan stood next. I saw her coming out of my father's room before. She had milk on her mouth, he said quietly. I didn't want to believe it, but now I see the truth. Grace wept. Please, Your Honor, she said, her voice shaking. It was just milk. He choked while I was feeding him. I would never hurt him. The courtroom was silent. Finally, the judge entered, his robes sweeping across the floor. Everyone stood. After reviewing the files, the judge spoke in a cold voice. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, we find Miss Grace guilty of the act. She is hereby sentenced to 7 years in prison. Grace gasped. No, she screamed, her knees giving way beneath her. Please, I'm innocent. I swear I'm innocent. Her cries echoed through the courtroom as the police grabbed her again. Ethan lowered his head, his heart pounding with guilt and confusion. Beside him, Laura sat quietly, a small, cold smile curling on her lips. Ethan came home that evening with a tired face. Laura met him at the door with a bright smile that did not reach her eyes. Babe, I'm happy your dad got justice, she said, sounding cheerful. Ethan tried to smile back, but his face stayed worried. Are you not happy? Laura asked, surprised. Ethan shook his head slowly. I'm happy, but I'm more worried about my father. Who will care for him now? Where will he get help? His voice was soft and tired. Laura reached out and put a hand on his arm. Don't worry. I'll take care of him. I will look after my father-in-law until we find someone we can trust. Ethan breathed out. Thank you. I really appreciate that. The next morning, Ethan kissed Laura and left for work. Please give him his medicine on time, he said as he walked out. I will, Laura answered, watching him go. Once the door closed, she walked to the sitting room and turned on the television. She put her feet up and pretended to relax. But the house was hot and quiet. The clock ticked loudly. By afternoon, she suddenly remembered. She had not given Mr. George's medicine. She did not feel like going, but she stood up slowly and walked to the kitchen. This man should not come and stress me, she muttered to herself. He should die and rest. She made a heavy bowl of hot soup. Her hands moved quickly, but her voice was cold. She took the bowl and the medicine and walked down the hall to Mr. George's room. She pushed the door open and saw him lying there, pale, thin, peaceful. For a moment she looked like she would cry, but the look in her eyes changed. It turned hard, quiet, angry. Open your mouth, she snapped, walking straight to his bed. Her voice was sharp. If you don't open it, I will force it into you. Mr. George blinked slowly. He could not move well. His face was wet with sweat. The spoon shook in Laura's hand as she shoved a spoonful of hot soup toward his lips. He tried to chew. He tried to swallow. Suddenly he choked. The hot soup came back up and splashed across Laura's face and clothes. For a second, everything was loud. The sound of the splash, the smell of hot soup, the heat in the room. Laura screamed. Her anger flared. She grabbed the bowl and threw it full force at his face. The hot soup hit him. The old man let out a scream, a long, painful sound. It was the first time anyone had heard him scream in months. The scream cut through the quiet like a knife. Tears ran down Mr. George's cheeks. He cried out again, his lips moving but no words coming. The pain made his whole body shiver. Laura stood over him, her chest heaving. Her face was wild. "You evil man," she hissed. "I will kill you before you kill me." She left the room like a storm and returned a few minutes later with a small bottle of pills. Her hands did not tremble this time. She held the bottle like a weapon. "This will teach you," she said under her breath. She took the bottle with the medicine Ethan had left and quietly swapped it with another small bottle she had hidden in her bag. The labels looked the same, but the pills inside were different. She gave him the new pills and watched him swallow. He looked at her with frightened eyes. He could not speak. He could only blink. Laura stood up and looked down at him. Her face was empty of warmth. "Now you will rest," she said softly, as if she were soothing a child. Then she left the room and closed the door behind her. Ethan was at work when his phone began to ring. He looked at the screen. A neighbor's number flashed. "Hello." Ethan answered quickly, already worried. "Is that Ethan?" a voice asked, shaky and small. "Please, are you home? I just heard a terrible scream from your house. It sounded like someone was in pain. Are you there? Should I call an ambulance?" Ethan's heart sank. His hand felt cold on the phone. "No, I'm at work." "What happened? Where is your father? Is he okay?" "There's blood. I think he's hurt. I can see someone inside the room. Please come home." Ethan stood up so fast his chair fell back. The office lights blurred. "I'm coming," he said, voice tight. He hung up, grabbed his keys, and ran out the door. As he drove, his mind raced. He remembered the video, the unplugged camera, the trial. He tried to call Laura, but the line went straight to voicemail. The street felt longer than usual. Ethan's hands tightened on the wheel. The sun was sharp and harsh. Every second felt like an hour. He did not know what he would find when he reached home. He only knew one thing. He had to get there before it was too late. Weeks passed like slow-moving shadows. The house that once echoed with noise and life was now filled with whispers and worry. Mr. George's health grew worse every single day. He could no longer move his hands or even open his eyes. His breath was shallow, and his skin looked pale and cold. The only way anyone could tell he was still alive was by touching his wrist and feeling the faint beat of his pulse. Ethan sat beside his father's bed, his face heavy with fear. "Dad, please," he whispered, holding his hand. "Stay with me." His heart couldn't take it anymore. He grabbed his phone and called the family doctor immediately. "Please, come quickly," Ethan said. "My father's not responding." Within minutes, the health professional arrived, his bag in hand. He examined Mr. George carefully, checked his pulse, opened one of his eyes, listened to his heartbeat, then looked at Ethan with a troubled face. "He needs to be taken to the hospital right now," the man said seriously. "He's in terrible condition. If we delay, it might be too late." Ethan didn't waste a second. "Let's move him," he said. They carried the old man carefully into an ambulance. Laura stood at the door watching them, her face blank, her hands folded. For a moment, she looked almost annoyed rather than worried. At the hospital, nurses rushed Mr. George into the emergency room. Machines beeped, doctors shouted instructions, and Ethan stood frozen in the hallway, his heart pounding. Hours later, the doctor came out, his expression grave. "We ran several tests," he said. "His body is very weak, and many of his organs are failing. I'm afraid he has a very low chance of survival." Ethan's throat tightened. "Please, doctor, what can we do? There must be something." The doctor sighed. "The only hope is to transfer him to a specialist hospital in the United Kingdom. They have the equipment and care he needs. But we have to act fast. He might not survive the next few days if he stays here." Ethan's eyes filled with tears. He nodded slowly. "Then do it. Do whatever it takes." When the doctor left, Laura turned to Ethan, her tone soft but cold. "Babe," she said, "are you sure that's necessary? Flying him to the UK will cost a fortune. He's already old. Maybe it's time to let him rest and join his ancestors." Ethan's head snapped up. His eyes were red. "Don't you ever say that again," he said sharply. Laura flinched. I'm sorry, I was just... Enough, he cut in, his voice breaking. That's my father we're talking about. He turned away, wiping his eyes. His heart was breaking, but his mind was clear. He wouldn't let his father die like this. Not after everything. Without wasting another minute, Ethan made arrangements. The doctors prepared the paperwork, and within 24 hours, Mr. George was on a medical flight to London. Ethan stayed behind only long enough to handle logistics. A trusted nurse from the UK hospital would meet him at the airport and take full care of him there. When the plane took off, Ethan watched from the runway, whispering a silent prayer. Please, Dad, hold on. Just hold on. Laura stood beside him, her face calm, her hands crossed over her stomach. She didn't say a word, but deep inside, a quiet thought crossed her mind, a thought darker than her silence. Weeks passed after Mr. George was flown to the United Kingdom. The house felt emptier than ever. Ethan and Laura lived alone now, just the two of them. Every night, the air between them grew colder. One quiet evening, Ethan sat in the sitting room watching a movie. The lights were dim, the only sound coming from the television. Laura walked in slowly and stood beside him, her face unreadable. Babe, she said after a long pause, there's something bothering me. Ethan muted the TV and looked up. What is it? Laura folded her arms. When are we going to get married? She asked softly. Ethan blinked. Married? That's not a problem, he said calmly. We'll do that once Dad is discharged from the hospital. I can't get married while he's still there. Laura frowned, her voice sharpening. Come on, Ethan. Do you even know when he'll be discharged? And how sure are you he won't come back in a coffin? The words hit Ethan like lightning. His jaw tightened. What did you just say? Laura's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't back down. I'm only saying the truth, she snapped. He's old, he's sick. You're wasting time waiting for him. Laura, stop it. Ethan shouted, standing up. That's my father you're talking about. Well, he's the reason we're not married yet, she fired back. Their voices rose higher and higher until the neighbors could hear them through the walls. Dishes rattled on the shelf as the shouting filled the room. Don't you dare talk about my father like that. Ethan roared. Laura's face twisted with anger. You always choose him over me. Then, the door suddenly swung open. The sound froze them both. They turned at once. Standing in the doorway, sitting weakly in a wheelchair, was Mr. George, alive, pale, but breathing. Behind him was a caregiver, gently pushing the chair inside. Dad, Ethan gasped, his heart skipping a beat. You're home? I didn't even know you were coming. He rushed over and knelt beside the chair, tears filling his eyes. You're okay? Thank God you're okay. Mr. George didn't smile. He didn't even look at Ethan. His face was cold, his eyes dull but sharp enough to sting. Laura, standing behind Ethan, looked down at her feet. She couldn't meet his eyes. The caregiver wheeled Mr. George further into the room. Everyone was quiet. Then, in a voice so faint yet filled with pain, Mr. George spoke. Where is Grace? The room went silent. You could hear a pin drop. Laura's fingers trembled. Ethan swallowed hard. Dad, she's in prison, he said carefully. Mr. George's head turned slowly toward him. In prison, he repeated. For what? For abusing you while you were sick, Ethan said. Mr. George's eyes widened. Oh my God, he whispered. The evil one is roaming free, while the innocent one suffers behind bars. What do you mean, Dad? Ethan asked in confusion. Mr. George turned his face toward Laura. His eyes darkened. What did I ever do to you, Laura? Why did you treat me this way? Why did you hate me? And why did you destroy Grace? Laura's lips parted, but no words came out. Her eyes shimmered with anger and fear. Mr. George's voice grew stronger. I never hurt you. I accepted you into my home. So tell me, why did you want to kill me? Something inside Laura snapped. Her face twisted, her voice cracked with rage. You did hurt me, Mr. George, she shouted. You never wanted me here. You told Ethan not to marry me. You said I wouldn't make a good wife. You told him to marry Grace instead. Mr. George's eyes widened in shock. How did you even know that? Ethan looked away, guilt crawling up his spine. I told her, he said quietly. What? Mr. George's voice broke with disappointment. You told her? Ethan, can't a father speak to his son in private anymore? I gave you advice as a father, and this is what you did with it. Ethan looked down, ashamed. I'm sorry, Dad. I didn't mean to cause all this. I just told her casually. I didn't know she'd take it this far. Mr. George shook his head slowly. His eyes filled with sorrow. I thought you were wiser than this, Ethan. Then, without another word, Mr. George raised his hand and gave a faint whistle. Within seconds, the door burst open. Police officers stormed into the house. Laura gasped, stepping back. Laura Benson, one officer said firmly. You are under arrest for attempted murder of Mr. George Ethan and for false accusation against Grace Williams. What? Laura screamed. No, no, you can't do this to me. The officers grabbed her wrists and snapped cold handcuffs around them. Dad, what's happening? Ethan asked, panicking. Mr. George's voice was calm but heavy. Justice, Ethan. This time, real justice. Laura struggled, tears pouring down her face. Ethan, please. Tell them I didn't mean it. I was angry. I was scared. Please, don't let them take me. But Ethan couldn't move. He could only stand there, frozen, as the police dragged her toward the door. Laura's cries echoed through the house, growing weaker as they took her outside. Mr. George watched silently, tears pooling in his eyes, not of pity, but of deep, quiet pain. Mr. George didn't waste a single second after the police took Laura away. The moment the house became quiet, he told his driver, "Take me to the prison. Right now." The caregiver tried to stop him. "Sir, you just came back from the hospital. You need rest." But he shook his head weakly. "No, someone else needs that rest more than I do." The drive to the prison was long and heavy. Rain had begun to fall, tapping against the car windows like soft tears from the sky. Mr. George sat silently in his wheelchair, his mind filled with guilt and sorrow. When they arrived, the guards led him inside slowly. The prison halls were cold, gray, and quiet. The air smelled of metal and sadness. Then he saw her, Grace. She was sitting alone behind the metal bars, her face pale and thin, her eyes hollow from sleepless nights. The once bright and gentle girl now looked like the shadow of herself. When she noticed him, she blinked twice, as if she didn't believe what she was seeing. Then, slowly, she stood up, her lips trembling. "Sir," she whispered. Mr. George's eyes filled with tears. "Grace," his voice cracked as he spoke. "I'm so sorry, my child." He wheeled closer, the sound of the chair echoing in the empty hall. "You should never have gone through this pain. You suffered because of lies, because of my blindness. I trusted the wrong people." Grace's eyes welled with tears. "Sir, you're alive. Thank God you're alive," she whispered. "That's all that matters to me." He reached through the bars and took her hands gently. "You are too kind, Grace. Too kind for this cruel world." His voice trembled. "I've already called my lawyers. You'll be released immediately. I won't rest until your name is cleared." Grace covered her mouth, trying not to cry, but the tears still fell. Mr. George looked straight into her eyes and said softly, "I've seen many people in my life, but I've never met a woman as pure-hearted as you. From today onward, you are my daughter. Whatever a father does for his daughter, that's what I will do for you, and even more." Grace couldn't hold it anymore. She broke down crying, her shoulders shaking. "Thank you, sir," she whispered between sobs. "Thank you so much." Mr. George reached forward and hugged her tightly through the cold metal bars. Tears ran down both their faces, tears of pain, of forgiveness, and of freedom finally near. The guards looked away, touched by the sight. In that moment, Grace wasn't a prisoner anymore. She was a daughter finally being seen for who she truly was. For the first time in months, Grace felt peace. And for the first time in years, Mr. George felt that his home and his heart could finally heal again. As the rain outside began to fade, sunlight broke through the clouds, painting the gray prison walls with a soft golden glow. Justice had finally found its way home. Truth may walk slowly, but it always arrives.